what I'm going to focus on. Then a few areas, for different stages of your career that you can, again, focus on. And my biggest learnings, so 3 or 4 problems that were the hardest for me, some tactical advice, and then resources. So what is growth? A lot of us, when we think of growth, we think of getting promoted, we think of making more money, and that is obviously what we all want to do, but the problem is we have less control over those in our day-to-day. And so if you only focus on that, you can end up getting frustrated or feel like you're not making progress. So, oh, and I forgot, I put the output metrics. I had to put some little data thing in there. So yeah, those are the output metrics of our career. But I want to focus on the input metrics, which is really building new skills, getting better at our current things, because that's something we have control over personally. And so that's where I have tried to focus in my career. And, again, going into that though, the next question I usually have is, what the heck do I learn? There's so much. You guys have probably all seen the modern data stack that has probably hundreds of tools listed on it. It can be overwhelming. So I'm going to cover kind of 3 areas on this. One, especially early career, focus on foundations. Not just technical foundations, but collaboration. Learning how to work with a team of other engineers to deliver projects and build great products. Communication. So getting in a habit early on of proactively sharing information. If you are working on a feature that's, say, going to be delivered in a month, don't wait till week 4 to say you're on track. Give people some regular updates. It helps ease people's stress, and then they won't come barging down your door asking, when is this? Are we on track? And then, obviously, technical foundations. Now, there's a wide variety of what data engineers do. So I spent a lot of time at Meta and Dropbox. For me, SQL, Python, and data modeling were the 3 things that foundationally I needed to be good at to work well. And even in the case with AI, right? If you don't have SQL foundations and you have an LLM spit out a great query for you, you need to debug it. You need to know how to troubleshoot it, figure out what's going on or why your windowed function isn't quite working as you would expect. Yeah, those are 3 for me. This may vary. If you're more on the BIE or analytics engineer side, visualization's probably up here as a top foundation. If you're doing more streaming, Spark is going to be something super important for you. So your mileage may vary, but I have a resource at the end actually from the DET website, so I'll share that. Now, as you continue to grow in your career, you've got your foundations down. Becoming business savvy is super important. And what I mean by that is being able to connect the work you're doing to how that actually matters to the business. How is it driving revenue or saving cost, or why does it matter? Not only for me do I find it more rewarding when I know how the work that I do actually contributes to the business, but it will help you better prioritize your work, deliver better products overall. Now, communication again, and I will probably say this multiple times, I think it's on my learnings as well, but proactive communication is great. At some point though, you're gonna need to learn to communicate your impact and not just what you're doing. So I'll dive in a bit deeper on how I personally struggled with that a lot. And same prioritization, this was another big learning point for me that I really struggled with. Learning how to say no. As data teams, we get so many requests from so many different stakeholders. It's really easy to get overwhelmed, burnt out, and I don't know about you guys, I'm a people pleaser, and so it was hard for me to say no. And then again, as you take on more work, at some point you're gonna have to kind of scale your impact beyond what you can do alone. That was another big shift that I had in my career when I moved from IC to manager at Dropbox. So being able to effectively delegate, set strategic direction, and then influence other teams as well. We consume data from data producers, and you need to figure out how do you get them to buy in and actually help you solve some data quality challenges versus just mitigating it in our pipelines. So those are the focus areas. Now I want to dive a bit deeper on my lessons learned. First one is communicating impact, and so this is kind of what I do now, but I want to start with just how this was a problem for me. For most of my career, I was working with other engineers, and I was working with data scientists. So when I was communicating, I was very detailed about what I was doing. So I built this pipeline, I used this technology, I did this thing, I solved this problem this way. And at one point, that shifted where I needed to send some communications to more senior leaders. And I sent my same kind of communications. It had been working for over 5 years. And I got crickets. I knew they cared about the problem I was trying to solve, but just nobody seemed to respond. Unfortunately, at that time, I didn't fix it. I just kept going and focusing on the technical solutions. But probably over about a year, I finally figured out how I was communicating wasn't working well. And these are the learnings that I took away. And whenever you're writing communications, you could leverage this yourself. But one, anything you read on communication, know your audience. So know who you're talking to. I obviously didn't when I sent a very technical email to senior leaders who did not care about what my data pipeline did or how it worked. Starting with the top or bottom line. So communicate your impact first. A lot of you guys probably see this as like TLDRs at the top of a post. That way you have a quick takeaway. And my husband actually works in sales, and he kind of drilled into my brain, what's the bottom line? And I just essentially have that on a loop every time I'm writing anything. And finally, I try to use kind of this like 1 minute rule to sanity check my communications, which is if the person I'm communicating to has 1 minute to read what I've written, can they take away what I want them to? And that has really worked well for me so far. We'll see. I'm sure in 5 years I'll be like, this was not it. I had to change it another way. Prioritization was another big challenge for me. So this is actually, I went from a data team that was centralized. We had sprint planning where I was an engineer. I showed up to sprint planning and I said, yes, I'll do that task. Okay, cool. Then I went to Meta where data engineers are embedded with the product, and I was managing my own backlog. At that time, I thought I knew what to do with planning. I had no clue what I was doing. I was getting requests across the board, and my approach to it was, let's just try and do everything and burn myself out. So that does not work, do not recommend. I ended up changing jobs because I was like, I'm too much of a yes man. I just have to start over where I can say no. So I actually did a lightning talk on this, and I will link that as well if you want a deeper dive on how I kind of balance the ad hoc and foundational work. But these are the 3 things that I think are really simple for prioritization, which is 1, actually I probably should have switched 1 and 2. Everybody gets one backlog. I don't care if you're coming from finance, sales, or marketing. If it's all coming to me or my team, it's got to go in the same place. And then within that backlog, I stack rank everything. So if everything is P0, nothing is P0, there can be no ties. So we really have to know what we're doing in the order. And then, just general, like, we'll put some day estimates. You can do capacity planning for your team to figure out what can I actually do in the next month. Yeah, the business wants 80 days of work. We have 20, we have to figure out if it's stack ranked right or what we do there. But we can't do that much. All right, and then I think this is the second to last one on my learning. Delegating effectively, delegation in general is very difficult, or it was for me. So I changed from an IC to a manager at Dropbox, but at some point, even if you stick the IC track, you're gonna have to delegate at some point. And I personally struggled, I felt bad delegating work. I was like, this task is too boring, or I'm just asking somebody else to do something. And I really held on to a lot of stuff. And again, I guess I have a trend of burning myself out through these methods, but I really struggled. I had a really good manager at the time who helped coach me and figure out how to delegate better. And so, this is something at some point you're gonna have to do. And just assessing your workload. So I had to look at my backlog of stuff for me. What can I delegate? What do I keep? And then I also like to align it with people's strengths. So, if somebody wants to learn data modeling or get more experience there, like, do I have something that they can take that on, and I can delegate that to them where it's a growth opportunity for them as well. Also, one thing I learned as I got a little bit better at this is I would try to delegate the how, and I'm sure everybody in here has probably had something delegated where they told you exactly how to do it, and it can be really frustrating because you're like, I can do this. I was that person who did that at times, and so what I learned to do is delegate the outcome we want and not the how exactly to do it. This may vary, right? If you're working with more junior folks, they will need more, explicit instructions on some areas. But if you're working with senior people and delegating to senior people on your team, just tell them what the problem you're trying to solve and let them come up with the solution. And it's great for everyone because then the person you're delegating to gets to take on and tackle a new challenge. But also, if I am the one setting, here's how we need to do everything, my entire team is limited to my brain. And that is not good. I want different ideas and different experience from everyone. And yeah, I delegated this one big project to a guy on my team, and he did it way better than the ideas I had, so I was super happy about that. So another thing, and this isn't really as much of a learning, but look for growth. Start before you feel ready. I don't speak in front of people. This is my second time this year to get up in front of a room. Definitely don't feel ready, but we learn through experience. Then ask your manager for opportunities. If you don't tell your manager what you want to learn, they won't know. And so, try to surface those things. And another thing that I did learn recently is if I'm feeling frustrated, this is probably a growth opportunity for me, and I'm just frustrated because other things have been easy and I'm struggling a bit. So instead of just, looking at something and go, oh, this is frustrating, like for whatever reason, blaming other things, kind of reflect and go, is there a way I could approach this differently that would scale? And the thing I was struggling with was how to get buy-in for certain projects. I felt like the challenge I wanted to solve, the real problem was real, but it wasn't landing how I was communicating it to others. And I reached out to a principal engineer on our team. I said, hey, you've successfully done this before. You've gotten initiatives kicked off. How did you do it? So trying to find people that have done what you want to do. Okay, kind of a big shift in gears here. So I figured I can't talk about growth without talking about interviews or promotions. I don't have a whole lot of detailed advice on this, but if you are interviewing, recruiters will give you resources typically to prep, or they'll tell you what types of interviews you're doing. Focus on those, practice at home out loud. I remember for my interviews, I used a piece of paper and pencil like it was a whiteboard and made up data modeling questions for myself and just did that. It can feel silly, but it definitely helps. And then, you always get the tell me about a time when questions in interviews. You don't want to have to think about that and spend a few minutes on the spot. Before you even are interviewing, go through perhaps some project examples, both of a success and ones where maybe there were some failures or challenges, and what you did. And the STAR framework, super popular, you may have all heard of it. Leverage that, it is helpful. And then finally, if you're trying to get promoted at work, the only advice I really have is talk to your manager. Every company's different, every team is different. Ask them what your gaps are to getting to the next level. Let them know you want to be promoted, because if they don't know, they might think you're fine and happy. So those conversations can feel uncomfortable, but you have to have them if you want to grow. And finally, here's a list of resources now. I know there's links and stuff. I will post this in the Meetup event page. So there's a DET, there's a resource hub on the website now. It's going to be getting a lot of refinement and stuff in the near future, but it's got those, data engineering roadmap, what are some of the foundational things. There's more curated list of learnings. Obviously, the blog as well, there's so much information for anything you want to learn there. And then my the books that are probably my favorites, the ones that come to mind. So Fundamentals of Data Engineering, Data Warehouse Toolkit, I mean, it's, dimensional modeling, it's still a great reference. Now, this one, Smart Brevity, is a communication book, and I highly recommend it. It has examples of how to write effectively for like an email or very different situations. We at my house love it so much that my husband and I both have a copy that we keep at our desk. So, and then finally, kind of on the collaboration front, Difficult Conversations is a really good book about how to navigate some of those hard conversations at work. And really, like, the baseline, I think, is you're all trying to solve the same problems at the end of the day, but it can be hard to come to that kind of same baseline, so it helps with that. So I really like that. And then, yeah, I did a prioritization talk, so that's linked there if you want to deeper dive into the whole stack ranking capacity planning thing. So, yeah, I'm sorry, I think I was pretty fast and sped through that. Any questions?
On the prioritization, when you said you were in an embedded team, how much guidance did you get from either your manager or like the leaders of the embedded team, or were you figuring it all out yourself?
I had support from my manager. I think my manager changed a few times there. So I had support and I could ask questions, but I think, was trying to figure it out myself, which is why I struggled more. But yeah, requests were coming in from like product managers, data science. I would say I think I worked most with my data science partner to prioritize like what was the top things.
As far as growth, how do you know when it's better to try to grow where you are or find somewhere new to grow?
Ooh, okay, that's a great question because I actually just changed jobs and had to think about that. I had a lot of growth opportunity where I was. I would say if you're engaged where you're at, like, and you feel like you're getting the opportunities where you are and you like your job, I think staying can be good, but I would say if you're trying to get the opportunities and you're just not, like, then maybe that's a time to make a move. For me, it was like, if I'm not learning or like growing quickly and just starting to feel like I was stagnating, you want to try to move away before I think you hit that stagnation stage.
I was curious, did you have any success, say, building tools so that the stakeholders can actually do the data exploration? Maybe simplified, kind of like teaching someone to fish?
Yeah, I've done a variety of that. So the last team I was on, we built dashboards, right? So that was it was more BI engineering team, and so that was a lot of our output. So we provided like deep dive capabilities within the dashboard so people could like slice and dice, and of course always everybody wants to export to Excel. So there was that option there. And another thing I have found success in is office hours. So I would get the same questions a lot, and I've done this a couple of times where I schedule office hours, I only answer questions during that 1 hour, and I work with people where they're basically writing the queries instead of me, so they can learn how to get it. And yeah, definitely would see people show up for like 2-3 weeks in a row, and then they had what they needed, and I didn't hear again.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, it was super helpful. How would you say prepping for data engineering, like early career opportunities, is changing with the new role of like AI and ML, and what specific recommendations would you give to somebody looking to start their career now as opposed to like maybe 10-15 years ago?
Yeah, I feel like I'm still trying to figure that out. Like AI is now for me, like I feel like I'm going back to foundations of like, what do I need to learn here? How do I use it? I would still go back to focusing on the foundation. So like I said, I can have an LLM generate the SQL that I need. But part of the reason I can do that is because I spent so long writing a bunch of SQL, and then I can troubleshoot it as well. Similarly with like data modeling or coding, like foundations is always a good thing to have, and it's gonna help either build the AI tools you wanna use or troubleshoot the code it spits out.
I have a question. So how would you define all the difference between passing off work versus delegating work, both on the receiving side and on the giving side?
Yeah, I think delegation is intentional. You're not just like, this thing came in, oh, here you go. Like when you're delegating, at least for me, I would align it to very specific people on my team. I would have one-on-ones with them, so I would know what they're interested in, I would know what they're good at, and I'd know where they want to grow. And so when I had things come in that I, would assess, okay, it's something I should probably delegate, I would use that of just to say who it would work best for. And I think another thing there is when stuff comes in on how do I decide what to delegate, I try to, hand off the more exciting work. Like I feel like as a manager, I'm like, I shouldn't be hoarding like this challenging fun stuff as much as I like would want to do it. Like that should be for people on my team. I kind of take up like the operational stuff.
I'm from someone who's a senior engineer in the team. Like I think a lot of folks might not be managers here.
Mm-hmm.
So and them being on the receiving side, how should they see or how should they identify if a senior engineer is passing off work versus delegating work?
For the senior engineer passing off to others?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think like for me it would be, is there a trend if it's like, okay, there's a bug, or we need to add this column, okay, I hand that off. And they hand off like a lot of the rote kind of boring work all the time and just hoard everything that's really exciting for themselves. Then they're just passing off work. If they, should be like chatting with their manager too, probably on who do we delegate to, because the manager may know that better, what people want to learn. But yeah, that's the answer I have.
See a lot of people smiling, that's why I asked that question.
Okay, somebody asked about what it's like today for new people with LLMs, but since you have Data Warehouse Toolkit, do you find that a lot of stuff is going out of favor, like the Kimball Star and most models? Are you finding that less popular in a lot of bigger companies?
That's a good question. I do think actually I've seen a bit of a resurgence of people talking about data modeling and kind of going back to some of these basics like dimensional modeling. What I think happened maybe like 2015 to 2020 is a lot of one big table, like let's just put everything all together. We'd have like a lot of cumulative stuff because it's like, we don't care about cost and we can just build these big tables and store all this data. And now everybody wants to cut their warehouse costs and cut compute, and seeing how, we have metric discrepancies all over the place. And so that's because we have 5 different tables that were, built up separately. So I feel like I hope it's coming back. I see a lot more talk about data modeling than I have before.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm a non-tech founder, and I got a small team of about 11. And one thing I realized in software is like a global collaborations, right? I got guys in Europe, India, all over the place. And the culture sometimes is kind of like tough to get everybody on the same page when it comes down to value, deliveries, communication. So I wanted to ask you, since you work for all of these major companies, have you seen any exercises that those corporations are maybe doing, to kind of get the team to kind of more collaborate a little bit more and be on the same page when it comes down to the value and everything? Thank you.
Yeah, my last role was fully remote. we were all pretty much still US based, so it wasn't as hard with timing as I'm sure it is with you with like global. But I think having some regular time to connect like online would be important. I don't know how feasible that is with the different time zones, but that was something that I always found helpful. I connected my team at least like once a week with everyone in there, and we'd have those like vision discussions and talking about that. And then maybe some like norms on asynchronous communication, because you're probably going to be doing a lot of that. One thing I've leveraged a lot is like screen recordings is something we did, because I personally find it easier to kind of walk through and demo like talking through what I'm doing or problem I'm trying to solve versus trying to type it all up, because it takes a long time, one, to type it up, and then it's really easy for miscommunication on that front. So screen recordings with talking through problems or what you're trying to do, I found really helpful.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I just have one question. How was your transition from a developer to a manager role? I mean, is that easy, complex? I mean, I hope you had a lot of challenges. I just want to talk about the challenges.
Yeah, definitely. And I was planning to touch on that here, but I actually forgot to add it to the slides. It was very challenging. I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges in my career, because it's just such a big shift in how you work. And you go from being able to you're doing pretty much everything yourself, and maybe like having another person work on projects with you, but you're not responsible for like career growth or performance conversations and really setting team standards. And so that's where the delegation came in. I hoarded stuff way too long, like I felt really bad. I was like, oh, this sucks. I don't want to like have this person do it. But then also because of that, like it was not good for my team either. So yeah, it was really hard. And I would say, there's a lot of ways to grow as an IC and move into staff, and you still have a leadership role in that way, where you're setting technical direction and you're mentoring people. Moving into management is quite a bit different than mentoring, so that was something I didn't quite realize when I made that move. But I was super lucky. My company had a lot of trainings for managers, and so I attended like every single one I could, and that really helped me, as well as a good manager myself, who was a coach to me.
As data engineers, we often get to touch on different things, such as like you need to know the business, and you also need to know the internal workings of things like Spark or streaming, and there's a wide variety of like areas you need to be good at, right? So like what does a mid-level engineer versus senior level engineer need to focus on to excel in their roles?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna vary like from place to place, but I think from mid to senior, at least from my perspective, that shift is being able to like set direction for others on the team and kind of up-leveling the quality standards of the data products the team is producing, getting more best practices, making sure like, let's say if we have a bunch of steps, right? How do we mitigate that? Finding the problems and bringing solutions to them. And it's not as much about like a specific technology or skill set there. That could vary like, based on where you're at, but I think usually the difference is how you start operating more at a team level. Thank you.
Yeah, how do you measure your impact if you are not working in an embedded team?
Yeah, I think that can vary. So I have, even if I'm not embedded, I'm trying to think how I say this, I've forced my way into meeting those people basically. Like, who do I need to know to learn what my work is impacting? So whether it's like, if I can't get the answer, say through my data science partners, then I'll be like, hey, who should I talk to? And it's just talking to people and asking like the why. what's the business trying to do? How do we make money? Like, we need to know all these things. So an example of that could be if you're working on, say, maybe sales data and you're building a real-time data pipeline for lead generation or something, instead of the impact of that could be like we are however many more like conversions in sales from that real-time activity. But yeah, sorry, I don't have a better answer. If it was knowing why, and then you work to connect and talk with people there.
All right, thank you for not just the talk, but also answering everybody's questions for like 20 minutes now. My question is, so you work at Dropbox and Meta, which are very tech-first companies, and Disney, I'm sure, has a very big tech arm, but it's not a tech-first company, especially if you look at its history. So I'm curious, what is your experience from a culture perspective or an operations perspective or whatever it is that you have to share about that experience and that shift?
I don't think I can talk about my current role, so I get worried on that. I don't want to say anything about the current.
That's fair.
Yeah.
What's the worst piece of career advice you ever got, and how did you figure out it was stifling your growth? It doesn't have to be the worst. Just bad.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if it's like explicit advice, but I think the pressure to deliver quickly and that being really tied to whether you're being successful or not is something that don't do it. Don't just deliver, as fast as possible to make somebody happy. Make sure that you push back, you get the quality that you want, you get the observability and alerts in place, or whatever it is. But yeah, a variety of my career, I could have been a lot better at that.
So oftentimes, like an advice that's given to mid-level trying to get to senior is you want to try managing up. Going back to your point about trying to elevate standards for product life cycle, what specifically have you done that kind of helped you like manage up and raise the standards?
Yeah, I think for me that goes back to learning to communicate impact first. So if we want to say add data quality checks, we have to communicate, unless you have a manager that understands that or senior leadership that's like, yes, that's what we should do. You have to communicate why that matters. So sometimes that's like evidence gathering of like, we've had this many steps, which leads to like, we had incorrect data. And so yeah, I think I would go back to learning how to communicate the work you're doing in a way that will make people care. So figuring out what is it they care about and then kind of laddering up what you're doing to that.
Thanks again for answering my question earlier. So we have a daily stand-up every day from 10 p.m. It's not the best for me, so I work with them from like 10 p.m. usually until about 1 a.m. and then I go to bed. But I'm in the process of changing the team lead. I'm a retired soccer player, right? So on the team, if the coach changes the captain in the middle of the season, sometimes, it sends a message to the group, it can be good and bad, right? So the team lead that we have currently is not the best. And there's another guy that's like very good. The problem is, the current team lead is the one that recommended me, his friend, and his friend is better. So I want to promote him. Do you have any tricks or any fit their ideas on how to communicate, make the change, and give the opportunity to the best so we can have the best product. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't want to have that conversation. That's very hard. Somebody's not going to be happy, right? Like, you can't make everybody happy when you're making those kinds of decisions. And it sounds like you need to make the decision that's best for your team and your product. The only thing I would recommend is know very clearly like why you're making that decision and how you're going to have that conversation with the person that is getting the not as good news. So, yeah.
I have a question on your one backlog. So, what tool did you specifically use to maintain that? And did all your XFNs have the visibility on your one backlog? How did you make sure everyone is aware of what you're doing? Or did you use GSD, work with hosts, or?
Yeah, I have used a variety of tools. I have a problem with actually changing them around, thinking the tool's the problem, but it's just the way I've organized it. I think Jira's a good one, right? Especially whatever your company's using, if there's like a centralized platform, that's just what I would go with. I've also used Airtable and like Google Sheets, stuff like that. But how I make sure, everybody has access. So they should have view access, but I usually would hold, say, meetings with those people as well, whether it's like bi-weekly or something with the key stakeholders. So we would then, review that stack rank backlog together and say like, hey, is this still the ranking for your team? Or I'd like to be able to say if it's for our product team, we can filter to all the product requests, make sure that's in a good place. And then, looking at it against, say, if we're stacking like product and finance, and at times I've just pulled in like DRIs and Slack from each of those teams, like, hey, here's what our current backlog looks like in terms of priority. Does anything look off to you? Because the backlog to me is like, it's living, it changes all the time, so we can move stuff around. But yeah, whatever tool your company's using, usually the best if people are already familiar with it, and then you usually have to kind of push them to review it because they're probably not going in and reading it without that.